Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an influencer Instagram Karen claims that my disabled daughter is ruining her photo shoot at a public beach. She claims that she is the owner of the beach and wants us kicked out. She ends up calling the police on us. Here is what happened. The title story starts like this. Karens really do live in a world of their own sometimes. One day when I was at the beach with my family, I came across a Karen that was full on insane and really believed herself to be some important person instead of just like everyone else. Before I get into that though, let me introduce myself and my family who were all there when this went down. I am an ex-soldier that served 2 tours overseas. After that, I became a mother and now have 2 children aged 7 and 5 with my amazing husband. My 7-year-old had some issues right away from birth and has been confined to a wheelchair her entire life. I'm lucky enough to get to be a stay-at-home mother with my kids while my husband is working. When we do have family time, we love going to the beach during the nice weather. The kids both love it and we always have a great time until this one day. Despite the beach being large, a family decided to set up their stuff pretty close to ours. That alone doesn't bother me, but I could tell right away that this family was a bit of a problem. The 2 kids started screaming and running around immediately, as well as grabbing all the food they brought with them. Some to eat, but mostly to throw because they love to lure the seagulls down just to chase after them. Meanwhile, their mother was busy setting up a tripod and complaining about things only a Karen could to her husband. She actually made comments roughly about the sun being too big today and the water being boring. Then she finished setting it up and started taking a ton of pictures of herself. I noticed other bikinis around that I can only assume she was planning to change into and then take more photos. Because, as I found out later, she was posting to Instagram and I guess wanted to act like she went to the beach many times while only going once. I found it obnoxious but was able to try and ignore it and pay attention to my own nice family day. However, that did not last long because Karen walked right up to me with her arms crossed and a face that wanted to talk to a manager. Karen, ahem. Me, yes? Karen, I came to the beach to have a nice day and show my Instagram followers nice pictures of me. I'm an influencer and your daughter is ruining all of my photos. I assume she was talking about my 5-year-old who I knew when we took photos liked to make faces in the background. Karen though pointed to my 7-year-old who wasn't really doing anything and just talking to her dad. Me, she's just sitting there. Karen, exactly. My followers want pictures of me and my fashion at the beach. Not an ugly disabled girl sitting in a wheelchair. You need to get her out of the beach now. She cannot even swim, so coming here makes 0 sense other than to try and ruin things for people. Me, she can swim actually, but putting that aside, who the hell do you think you are? Demanding that I remove my child from the beach while she is doing nothing wrong? We are not leaving the beach because you want photos to come out a certain way. You're the one that decided to come and take photos right next to my family in the first place. Karen, this is where the best lighting is. If you have any taste, you would know who I am and that I own this beach and demand that you leave. What followed was a long period of us going back and forth with her story, becoming more unstable the longer she yelled and ranted. The entire time, by the way, her kids and husband did not even bat an eye, so I can assume that she's acting like this all the time. She kept going too with her being extremely wealthy from being an influencer and knowing people in high places in the city we live in. And that if she was forced to call the police, she would make sure all those important people knew about us and we would never get a peaceful moment again. Now, I knew for a fact that this was a public beach and I told her again that she had other places she could go to and take photos. None of that was good enough for her and then she started a totally separate rant about how disgusting disabled people supposedly are. I really don't want to repeat even in typing the things that she said, but let's just say her viewpoint is that they shouldn't exist and be taken care of at birth. I was getting so steamed and it was taking all my self-control not just to punch this woman in the face. Karen finally stopped the rant before pulling out a cell phone and calling the police on us. She started fake crying that there was a family at the beach assaulting her and she was fearing for her life. That she needed officers sent right away because she didn't know what we would do to her. I couldn't believe that she called with a total lie to get the police to try and kick us out. At this point, the hero of the story is actually my husband. Once she called the police, he pulled out his phone and started recording her. He wanted proof that we were not doing anything and that she was the one screaming and instigating the entire thing. It worked wonders because the moment she saw the camera on her, she went totally ballistic. She hated the fact that she was being recorded and demanded that we turn it off right now. It is totally legal for us to film her on the public beach, and we told her that we were not gonna stop until an officer arrived. She took several steps closer to us, and I was worried she was gonna grab and destroy the phone. Instead, she did something so much worse than that. She slapped my 7-year-old across the face and screamed at her about ruining her photos. She was also starting another anti-disability rant, but it didn't get very far. Once she put her hands on my daughter, every sense of holding back my rage was gone. I punched her so hard, I'm amazed that her nose didn't end up being broken, but she went down hard. She was knocked out because she was so dazed that she just laid there until the police arrived. To the scene of my daughter with a red slap mark on her face sobbing, Karen on the ground dazed, and my husband recording the entire thing on his phone. We showed the police the video that we took showing Karen calling the police while we were doing nothing wrong. Then her having the freak out and finally slapping my daughter across the face. Of course, my punch was also on full display, but I didn't care if I got in trouble for defending my daughter. I was only asked where I learned to punch like that, and when I explained my background, I just got thanked for my service. Karen, on the other hand, got in serious trouble by the police as they were not happy with her. First of all, she called them under false pretenses, which in itself was a crime since there was no emergency happening. Additionally, we pressed charges against her for the assault on my daughter. It was not a surprise when in court Karen did not get an ounce of sympathy for attacking a 7-year-old in a wheelchair and then yelling at her about ruined photos. She was found guilty, and now her next photo shoot is gonna be in an orange prison uniform. I doubt she's gonna post that one onto her Instagram though, as getting a phone into prison seems like something Karen would fail miserably at. And by the way, Ripe Star, such a coincidence, speaking about prison, I have recently started rewatching Oz, which is absolutely my favorite prison series of all time, and in my opinion also the best one. However, I would love to hear from you, what is your favorite prison TV show on TV? Let me know in the comments. And the next one is another revenge story. It starts like this. I was a grocery checker in the 90s. One day around noon, I was working the 10 items or less cash and only express line that was used by many people who were just grabbing a quick sandwich for lunch, so it was important to keep out people who had carts full of groceries. There was one other regular check stand open across from me that had one person being checked out with a large cart that was full. I did not have anyone in my line at the time, and Karen pulls up to the other check stand with a heaping cart and notices me standing there. She asks if I can check her out, and I tell her, no, I'm sorry, I have to be available for people grabbing lunch. Over the next 30 seconds, she just stared at me and then pulled her cart up to my check stand and started putting all of her things on my check stand and says, "You're not doing anything, you can check me out." So I was kind of stuck, so I tried to check her out as fast as I could and didn't say much. Wouldn't you know it, pretty soon I had a line of about 5 people standing there with their sandwiches and cokes glaring at me. Remember, it was a cash lane, so as I'm finishing her order, Karen takes out her checkbook and writes a check. Mind you, she didn't start writing it until I was about done. More delay. This was her big mistake, her address was on the check. So, on my lunch break, I got the subscription cards from all the magazines and proceeded to subscribe to her to just about every magazine we carried, and I always checked the 2 years bill me later option. I even signed her up for the Columbia Music Club, and I picked the very worst records. Weeks later, when she started getting all of the mags and bills for them, there is no way she would connect it to the checker she was rude to. I was probably one in a long string of cashiers that she was rude to. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. And by the way, if you have enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. So this one starts like this. I'm working for a pretty big company, lots of departments, lots of "we are the best" talk, and we really are. Core values are followed pretty well and major issues get dealt with quite well, apart from my boss, who we can call Gail. She is a micromanager to say the least, and a workaholic who expected you to do a lot but never outside of your normal shift, since she thought OT was the devil for us hourly workers. The first MC was Gail tasking me with this monthly report to hand up the chain to Mandy, who was a pretty big deal. The report was intensive and very in-depth, so it took a lot of unpaid overtime to learn and get it down. Gail did not appreciate it and questioned what I was doing as to why it was taking so long. More on this later, as learning something out of my scope was not too appropriate. Myself and Mandy got to know each other very well and developed a great working relationship, which certainly benefited me as much as it could. We were generations and countries apart, no romantics. Gail found out Mandy was asking me questions about my sites and for some reason didn't take too kindly and informed me that any and all communication from myself to Mandy must go through her, Gail, including this report. Thankfully, Gail has a company-wide reputation for being a bit cray-cray, so I could hear Mandy roll her eyes on the phone the first time Gail sent her the report rather than I. I had told Mandy that Gail knew very little about this report, especially the most important part, and 2 specific questions would likely have her forward those questions to me to answer. So of course those 2 very specific questions were brought up, but not by email, but rather on a big call of bigwigs just as I happened to step out of the office and was unable to field quick questions from Gail over the computer. And the feedback was nothing but a roasting for Gail, as she had of course said the report was hers initially, and thus the report was taken away from Gail and I altogether. This upset Gail, so she hammered back why I didn't do other work while I was learning this report. 6+ months had passed and I had it down to an absolute science that took no time updating. And then asked me to begin logging everything I do every day. Due to other factors in this job, HR was already looped in on everything that was going on between Gail and I, so this was as well. As you can already guess, the long story short is this log was filled out to the minute after every task, phone call or anything I did, including time for filling out the log. The amount of detail I put in for this log, Gail wanted as much detail as possible, allowed for me to actually spend 2 to 3 minutes filling out this log for even the smallest task of a passerby of my office door, asking me a quick yes-no question. I absolutely loved it. This unfortunately did not allow me to complete all my normal tasks daily, and by the end of the first week I had quite the pile of additional work. Gail, myself and HR got on a call to discuss all this after the week, and HR obviously sided with me and told Gail to either push work off me to someone else or get rid of this log that showed that I was skipping breaks. Good thing I wrote the log. These weekly calls also got myself a separate payment for an estimated but realistic amount of unpaid overtime due to the first paragraph and another project. Good guy HR. Despite HR making my life a lot easier, Gail did not, so I made the decision to switch departments entirely, 0 carryover. Within 2 months of my switch, the entire department was functionalized with a few other departments due to creating a better balance of work to employee, changing the job scope of all my former colleagues entirely and coincidentally rendering Gail's job useless. She was pushed to a special projects role for a year where special projects then magically ended and she was let go. My new manager likes to send emails out to those under him who were promoted, and she was able to see 2 of those with my name on it and the second just days before her final one. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story about a neighbor. I, female 28, recently moved into a new neighborhood. All my neighbors are lovely, especially my next door neighbor, bless his heart, wink wink. He is married and has 2 kids. I noticed that he's been looking towards my house for a while. So far, I had caught him doing it twice. He had his binoculars with him and was basically seemingly looking at my living room. I hate confrontation, so what I did was close the curtains and go about my day, but it started escalating. The other day, he was peeking at my backyard where I was sitting from his balcony and his binoculars fell in my backyard. I looked up and he was gone. He knew that I saw him. I took the binoculars and put them inside. In the evening, he came knocking on my door asking how I was done and whatnot. I rolled my eyes, but I kept it civil. He then brought up the binoculars and said that they must have fell in your backyard earlier today. I was like, wonder how that happened. He said something about his kids probably messing with them and asked if I could go get them for him. I said I have them, but I won't give them to him unless his wife comes and gets them herself. He looked at me shocked and angry and said that these binoculars are his and they are special because he has them from when he was in the military. And he also said that his wife has nothing to do with this. I told him that I will give them back once his wife shows up and asks for them. All he has to do is send her over. He threw a fit saying that he cannot send her because then she will misunderstand the situation. I told him there is no misunderstanding if it was really their kids that were using the binoculars and insisted that I won't give them back until his wife comes and gets them. We got into an argument, but he kept his voice as low as he could and then left looking furious. He has been complaining about me wanting to stir up drama and keeps demanding that I return his binoculars back to him and leave his wife out of it. Am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP is the a-hole here for not returning the binoculars or not? And yeah, I would say in this situation, it's pretty clear that the neighbor knows he did something wrong. That's why he does not want his wife to get involved. Also, that's a pretty genius move on the part of OP. Although I'm kind of curious what the law says about this. If someone drops some kind of item on your property, is it now technically yours or does it still belong to the other person? If you know, let me know in the comments. Either way, someone in the comments said, not the a-hole. Honestly, good for you for standing your ground on it. The whole situation is really creepy. Alternatively, to avoid potentially getting the police involved, you could wait until he's not home and then take them to the wife yourself. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, your neighbor is a creep. He knows he's doing something wrong and he's trying to get away with it. I'm sure other neighbors have noticed. If you see creepy neighbor's wife, see if you can talk to her. Get some cameras and close the curtains facing their house. If he's watching you in the yard again, snap a photo and call the cops. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would also love to hear from you. If your neighbor was watching you with binoculars and potentially recording you, what would you do? Would you go to the police? Let us know in the comments. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. This happened a few years ago, but I thought with all the stories of bad HOAs, I will tell you all one of how I actually used a good HOA to my advantage to deal with my horrible neighbor. Now, to start things out, the first part of this story happened when I actually was not home. My family took a 3-day weekend to go and visit some family. Now, my neighbor is kind of the guy that thinks he deserves everything and we should all revolve around him. I obviously try to avoid this guy at all costs, but when you live right next door, it tends to be a little bit difficult. My approach was to find an excuse to get away as soon as I could while trying to not really listen to what he has to say, because all of it really was idiotic and just gloating about himself. Back to the weekend where I was oblivious to everything going on. Neighbor decided that he should not need to pay for water or electricity if the house right next to him was not even going to be there. Why run up his own bill when he could run up mine? He took a hose and attached it to the spigot in my backyard. Then he dumped the other end into his pool and just turned on the water. Now, I don't know the exact amount of water it takes to fill a backyard swimming pool, but I will say it's not a small amount. It was not like one of those tiny rubber pools that you get for your toddlers. This was a big one that he had installed right into the ground. We will get back to the pool a little bit later though, because he figured, why stop at water? He ran a huge extension cord to my backyard where I have an outlet, and honestly, it's not too far away from the spigot. I would not be surprised if his plan was to just steal the water and then he saw the outlet while he was over here. He then proceeded to use my electricity to run some electricity in his backyard, and I would assume by the bill into his house as well. When I got back though, it was a little obvious something had gone down even before I got any kind of bill. My grass had a dent in it, like something, the hose, had been lying on it for a while. Luckily, I had video cameras and decided to go look at everything that happened when I was away. What I found out was exactly what I just told you above, and when I saw all of this, I was really angry. I was sick of this guy thinking he was the white-hot center of the universe and wanted to take him down a few pegs. I called the police on him because stealing my water and electricity was clearly illegal. Not to even mention that to steal it he would have trespassed onto my property. The thing is, that solution just did not feel satisfying enough for me, because they gave him a warning for the trespassing and told him when I got my bill breakdown for water and electric, he would have to pay for what was used that weekend. For me, that felt like a slap on the wrist and was not going to discourage him from doing something like that again. I wanted some bigger revenge, and I got it not from being sneaky or knowing some big loophole. No, I was going to get it from things that he flat out told me himself on those occasions I wanted to get away from him.
I told you we were going to get back to his pool, and this is the part that it becomes important. One of his self-important rants, he mentioned that the fees for a permit and building codes for a pool were so expensive that he did not even bother dealing with all of that. He just made sure that it was going to fit in a spot that nobody would notice and he would get away with saving all of that money. I also mentioned in the beginning to keen readers that I was going to be using the HOA in order to get my revenge on this neighbor. Now, the HOA in my neighborhood is actually fine compared to other stories that I have read. They get involved when it is needed, but for the most part they just let us live our lives. I make a call to the HOA and tell them that the neighbor has a pool that looks like it goes against many of the guidelines that the HOA has regarding safety. While neighbor may have looked at permit laws and building codes for the pool, he was too arrogant to look into the HOA rules. When I told them that I felt there was a huge safety concern with it, they were not slow to come and check things out. I could hear them talking to my neighbor through the yard, and while I did not get every single word, I got the gist of things. First of all, the HOA was telling him that they tried to look up the town records for his pool, but could not find any. While I cannot confirm it, I know they probably called the town to tell them about the pool after they saw it, and there was no record of it. Then the HOA member started walking around his pool with a clipboard marking down everything that was in violation due to the HOA policy about private pools. I know most people hate when the HOA butt in, but honestly, the things I was hearing her say did not even seem unreasonable to me. For one, since it was an in-ground pool, they were supposed to have some kind of permanent ladder to prevent people from getting stuck in the pool. They also had it too close to their back doors, which would be a danger to people exiting that part of the home. They were also supposed to keep it covered when not in use to stop animals or even small children from falling in and nobody being around to help. Maybe some of you will think that is overboard, but I personally think that it is nice to have safety measures because pools can be dangerous. The HOA and town combined told him that he had to get rid of the pool or they were going to do it for him. He had to spend a good chunk of money removing the entire pool and having to fill the hole it left with dirt, making his backyard look pretty horrible. I'm pretty sure if the town seriously got involved, he would have ended up getting fined for building the pool without permits or something like that. If he had won, he would have known to follow all the HOA rules regarding pools. The best news of the whole thing was that I never actually had to listen to this guy talk about himself again. He moved away a couple months after the entire thing, and while I don't know where he went, I know he left this neighborhood. If this guy did not decide to be a thief, then he would probably still to this day be living in that house with his nice pool. Crossing a neighbor that knows one of your big illegal secrets is a pretty dumb thing to do. Maybe this taught him that everything does not revolve around him, and if he's going to fill a pool, to do it with his own water next time. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, in general, I really dislike it when people brag about things. However, in this case, you have to be pretty stupid to brag about something illegal and then even steal electricity from your neighbor and not suspect that the neighbor would get some sort of retaliation.
And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.